May 30, 1942. 10 Downing Street, London. The air hangs thick with the scent of cigar smoke, mingling with the faint tang of polished oak and the distant rumble of anti-aircraft guns echoing over the Thames. Prime Minister Winston Churchill paces the dimly lit study, his bulldog face furrowed in determination, the weight of the war pressing on his broad shoulders. His secretary, a young woman named Elizabeth Layton, sits poised at her typewriter, fingers hovering over the keys as Churchill halts mid-stride, his voice booming in that unmistakable gravelly timbre. "Piers for use on beaches," he dictates, gesturing emphatically with his cigar. "They must float up and down with the tide. The anchor problem must be mastered. Let me have the best solution worked out. Don't argue the matter. The difficulties will argue for themselves." Layton types furiously, the clack of keys punctuating the silence. Churchill slumps into his armchair, exhaling a plume of smoke that curls toward the ceiling. This isn't just another memo. It's a gauntlet thrown down to the engineers and admirals who've been dragging their feet. For months, the Allied High Command has grappled with the nightmare of invading occupied Europe. How do you land hundreds of thousands of troops, tanks, and supplies without a deep-water port? The French harbors, Cherbourg, Le Havre, are fortresses, bristling with German guns and mines. Seize one too soon, and you'd invite slaughter. Flash back just 10 months earlier to the bitter lessons of 1941. In the War Office's map-strewn rooms, civil engineer Guy Mounsell had scribbled a proposal for an artificial harbor, floating breakwaters and piers that could be towed across the sea, but it gathered dust, dismissed as fanciful amid the Blitz and U-boat terror. Now, with America in the war and pressure mounting for a second front, Churchill's impatience boils over. He's no stranger to bold ideas. Back in 1915, as First Lord of the Admiralty, he'd sketched crude plans for temporary harbors off German islands like Borkum and Sylt. Those never materialized, but the seed lingered. The catalyst ignites on August 19, 1942. Off the coast of Dieppe, France, the pre-dawn haze lifts to reveal a hellscape. Canadian troops of the 2nd Division, supported by British commandos and American Rangers, storm the pebble beaches under withering fire from Wehrmacht positions atop the cliffs. Major General John Hamilton, Ham Roberts, commanding from the destroyer HMS Calpe, watches in horror as landing craft grind ashore amid exploding mines and machine gun chatter. Tanks of the Calgary Regiment bog down on the shingle, their treads useless against the steep incline. By midday, the raid, Operation Jubilee, is a bloodbath. Over 3,600 casualties, 106 aircraft lost, and not a single objective held. The port remains in German hands, its facilities sabotaged beyond quick repair even if captured. In the debriefing rooms of Combined Operations Headquarters at Richmond Terrace, London, Vice Admiral John Hughes Hallett, a sharp-eyed naval officer with a reputation for bluntness, stands before Lord Louis Mountbatten, Chief of Combined Operations. Mountbatten, resplendent in his uniform, leans forward, his face etched with the raid's failure. "If we can't capture a port," Hughes Hallett declares, his voice cutting through the murmur of aides, "then we must take one with us." The room falls silent. Mountbatten nods slowly. This is no joke. The Dieppe debacle has exposed the folly of relying on enemy harbors. Supplies can't trickle in over open beaches forever. Tides, storms, and German artillery would choke any invasion. Hughes Hallett's words echo Churchill's memo, sparking a frenzy. By mid-June, Welsh civil engineer Hugh Ioris Hughes, working from his modest office in Bangor, North Wales, submits sketches to the War Office. His concept, massive floating structures, breakwaters of concrete caissons, piers on pontoons, that could be prefabricated in Britain and assembled off Normandy. Hughes, a quiet innovator with a background in bridge design, envisions them rising and falling with the tides, anchored against the Channel's fury. Between June 17th and August 6th, his drawings pile up, spud piers with adjustable legs, roadways snaking from ship to shore. But skepticism reigns. In smoke-filled meetings at the Admiralty, engineers like Brigadier Bruce White of the Royal Engineers shake their heads. "Impossible," they mutter. The scale is staggering. Miles of floating steel and concrete, towed across 100 miles of U-boat-infested waters, all in secrecy. Materials are scarce. Britain's factories churn out tanks and planes, not fantasy ports. Yet Mountbatten presses on, outlining specs in autumn 1942, piers at least a mile long, handling 2,000-ton ships round the clock, in winds up to force 6. As winter descends, the idea coalesces. Hughes Hallett joins the Overlord planning staff as Naval Chief of Staff, bridging Navy and Army. Prototypes are whispered about, trials in remote Scottish bays. Churchill, ever the meddler, demands updates, his memos difficulties indeed arguing loudly. But in the dim glow of blackout curtains, a team assembles. Scientists like Professor J.D. Bernal, engineers like Major Alan Beckett. They're racing the clock, for Stalin demands action, and Hitler fortifies his Atlantic wall. Imagine it. You're there in the ops room, maps unrolled under flickering lamps, the scent of tea and tension thick. This isn't just engineering. It's defiance against the impossible. The Mulberry Harbors, as they'll come to be called, named after the code word for the project, are no longer a dream. They're the key to cracking Fortress Europe. November 1942. A fog-shrouded inlet near Loch Ryan, southwest Scotland. The chill wind whips off the Irish Sea, carrying the briny sting of salt and the metallic tang of fresh-welded steel. You stand on the heaving deck of a requisitioned trawler, spray stinging your face, as Major Alan Beckett, a wiry, bespectacled Royal Engineer with grease-streaked overalls and a clipboard clutched like a shield, shouts orders over the roar of diesel engines. "Steady on the hawser, ease her port." His voice cuts through the gale, directing a team of 50 sodden men hauling a prototype pontoon pier into position. The structure, a 100-foot chain of interlocking steel boxes filled with concrete ballast, bucks against the waves like a reluctant beast, its rivets groaning under the strain. Beckett grips the rail, eyes narrowed against the horizontal rain. This is Phoenix Trial Number 1, the first real test of the Mulberry's spine. Months of Churchill's memo have birthed a hydra of designs. The Phoenix breakwaters, hulking concrete caissons, each the size of a 6-story building, to form a floating wall against the channel's fury. The whale roadways, flexible steel treadways spanning from ship to shore, and the spud piers, pontoon platforms with retractable legs to rise and fall 25 feet with the tide. Beckett's job? Make the pier survive a force 5 gale without splintering like matchwood. Below decks, in a cramped workshop lit by hissing acetylene lamps, draftsman Ron Harris sketches frantic revisions. Sparks fly from arc welders as shipwrights from camel-layered fuse plates thicker than your thumb. "It's mad," mutters Petty Officer Tom Riley, a Liverpool docker turned naval rigger, wiping sweat from his brow. "Tow these monsters 80 miles? They'll capsize before Dover." But Beckett, fueled by black tea and sheer will, iterates relentlessly. By dawn, the pontoon holds. Waves crash over it, but it floats, unbowed. Word filters south to London. At the Ministry of War Transport's requisition mansion in Savernick Forest, Wiltshire, Brigadier Bruce White pores over blueprints in a room wallpapered with tide charts and stress diagrams. White, a broad-shouldered veteran of Gallipoli bridges, slams his fist on the oak table. "Scale it up. We need 200 Phoenix units, 6 miles of breakwater per harbor." His team, 300 engineers crammed into Nyson huts, churns out specs, each caisson 200 feet long, 60 feet high, weighing 6,000 tons, sinkable on-site to form a crescent shield. Cost? $20 million, equivalent to 100 Spitfires. Resources? Scraped from bombed-out factories, with concrete mixed under blackout to evade Luftwaffe spies. Across the Pennines, in Teesside's shipyards, the behemoths take shape. You hear the thunder of pile drivers at Middlesbrough, where Foreman Jack Ellis oversees the Phoenix fleet. Flooded dry docks birth the first caisson, Unit A1. its walls poured in monolithic slabs. Like birthing elephants, Ellis grunts to his crew as cranes groan under the load. Secrecy is ironclad. Workers swear the Official Secrets Act, windows blacked out, convoys rolling at night. Code names cloak everything. Operation Mulberry, with harbors dubbed A for Arromanches and B for near Corseul. Winter trials intensify. December 1943, Oban Bay. Snow dusts the hills as Vice Admiral John Hughes Hallett, bundled in greatcoat, watches from HMS King Alfred. A whale roadway prototype unrolls from a Liberty ship, its chessboard steel mats clanging into place atop swaying beats. 60-foot pontoon floats, lashed end to end. Royal Marine bugler sounds carry on, and a line of Shermans rumbles ashore, treads chewing the metal without a buckle. "By God, it works," Hughes Hallett mutters, scribbling notes. But doubts linger. Anchors, 6-ton Danforth hooks, tested in 40-knot winds, drag like kites. Beckett redesigns overnight, kedge anchors with 10-mile warps. You feel the pulse quicken in Whitehall. Lord Mountbatten, chain-smoking in his Combined Ops HQ, bullies the Treasury for steel. "This isn't a harbor, it's the Second Front," he roars at Undersecretary Charles Williams. By spring 1944, 70 Phoenixes crowd the Mersey, towed in clusters by tugs like battered elephants on leashes. American allies, awed, contribute 23 more from their East Coast yards. Professor J.D. Bernal, the wiry physicist with a pipe clenched in teeth, consults on ballast. His calculations ensure the caissons sink upright, valves timed to the second. Yet sabotage whispers, a German agent caught near Southampton with Mulberry sketches. Security tightens, dummy convoys stage decoys off East Anglia. In Bangor, Hugh Iris Hughes refines the pierheads. 400-foot towers on legs, cranes swinging 30-ton nets of ammo. Trials at Langstone Harbor reveal flaws. Pontoons shear and cross seas. Beckett's fix. The Swiss roll. Coiled roadways floated across, unrolled under fire. As April blooms, the fleet masses. 326 lighters, 80 tugs, 200 dredgers, 7,000 vessels total for Neptune, the landings. You're amid the armada in the Solent, salt crusting your lips, the horizon bristling with mulberry ghosts. Engineers like Beckett, sleepless, scarred hands bandaged, know the stakes. Fail, and Overlord starves on Normandy's sands. Succeed, and Europe cracks open. Dawn, June 6, 1944. Jower. The Normandy coast looms through the murk, a jagged silhouette under the thunder of naval barrage. From HMS Ajax, Rear Admiral William Tennant, Mulberry's naval overseer, a tall, unflappable figure in peaked cap, signals, "Commence assembly." You're ashore now, boots sinking in Gold Beach's bloodied sand, the acrid reek of cordite and burning vehicles thick. Paratroopers of the 6th Airborne hold the flanks. Infantrymen from the Durham Light Infantry dig in amid craters from 1,000-pound shells, but supplies lag. LSTs, landing ship tanks, beach at low tide, stuck till the next high. Otway's team leaps from LCIs, landing craft infantry, tools slung, acetylene torches, winches, diving gear. "Phoenix Line, form up!" he shouts over the whine of Stuka dives. Frogmen in wetsuits plunge into the 50-degree surf, guiding the first caisson, Phoenix No. 17, into position 1,000 yards offshore. Valves hiss open, seawater floods the compartments, and it settles with a seismic thud, bow wave surging shoreward. One by one they link, interlocking tongues and grooves, anchors biting the seabed. By noon, the breakwater arcs, a man-made reef defying 4-foot waves. Inland, chaos reigns. At Omaha, American Mulberry B faces hell. Rangers scale Point du Hoc under machine gun hail, but the beach is a slaughter pen. Captain Edward Luther of the U.S. Navy's Beach Battalion directs tugs amid floating bodies and wrecked Higgins boats. "Sink 'em fast," he yells as Phoenixes arrive piecemeal. But the storm brews anew, forecasts underestimated. You watch from a dune, heart pounding as whale sections unspool. Beckett himself, ferried from England overseas, align the beats, lock the tread. Steel clangs as pontoons chain together, forming a mile-long causeway. The first lorry, a Bedford QL, rumbles across, tires thumping the mats, delivering 105mm howitzer shells to the front. By dusk, Mulberry A unloads 500 tons, bully beef tins, jerry cans of fuel, stretchers for the wounded streaming back. Yet the Germans counter. Field Marshal Rommel, racing from Herrlingen, orders the 352nd Division to shell the harbors. 88mm rounds whistle overhead, one splintering a spud leg. Luftwaffe sorties, rare but deadly, strafe the piers. Divers like leading seaman Harry Mills repair underwater, bubbles rising amid mines and debris. As night falls, searchlights pierce the blackout, the harbor a glowing hive. Tennant signals Eisenhower, Mulberry A operational. The impossible floats, a lifeline pulsing with victory's blood. June 7, 1944. Dawn breaks over Arromanches, the Normandy sun piercing the haze of gun smoke that clings to the cliffs like a shroud. You wade through the knee-deep surf of Gold Beach, the cold channel water soaking your boots, the metallic clang of unloading operations echoing against the newly formed Mulberry A cranes whine overhead, their long arms swinging pallets of 25-pounder artillery shells from the Liberty ship SS Empire Lance, docked at Pierhead No. 3. Sergeant Bill Otway, sweat beading on his forehead despite the chill, directs a squad of pioneers. Hook it secure, mind the sway. The net groans under 20 tons of cargo, lowering onto a waiting DUKW amphibious truck that churns through the shallows toward the whale roadway. The harbor pulses with life, a floating city defying the odds. The Phoenix breakwater, now a solid crescent 2 miles long, muffles the waves to a gentle lap inside the enclosure. 4 spud piers jut seaward like steel fingers, each 1,000 feet long, their pontoon platforms rising and falling with the 24-foot tide on hydraulic legs that hiss and clank. Beckett's design shines. The adjustable spuds grip the seabed, allowing seamless unloading around the clock. By midday, 7,000 tons cross the piers, rations for the 3rd Canadian Division pushing toward Caen, fuel for the Cromwell tanks of the 7th Armored Brigade grinding through bocage hedgerows. Inland the impact ripples. General Bernard Montgomery, Monty to his troops, surveys from his caravan HQ near Crewley, binoculars trained on the harbor's haze. Bloody marvelous, he mutters to aide-de-camp Captain Noel Chavasse, the scent of pipe tobacco mingling with diesel exhaust. Without Mulberry, the beaches would choke. Open shore unloading at Juno and Sword yields a trickle, bogged by tides and E-boat raids. Here, efficiency reigns. Cranes like the British-built Coles swing 40 loads per hour, lorries queuing on the whale treadways that flex like accordions over the swells. Across at Omaha Beach, Mulberry B mirrors the miracle, though scarred by D-Day's carnage. Captain Edward Luther, his uniform torn from shrapnel, oversees assembly amid the wreckage of Vierville Draw. American Phoenixes, taller, squarer than their British kin, form a harbor for the 1st Infantry Division. Seabees from the 81st Construction Battalion weld under fire as V Corps Commander Major General Leonard Jarrow radios urgent pleas, supplies critical, push the piers. By June 8th, B unloads 5,000 tons, M1 Garands for the Big Red One, plasma for field hospitals where medics like Corporal Eugene Sledge patch the wounded under canvas tents. You feel the rhythm, a convoy of LSTs noses in, ramps dropping to disgorge M4 Shermans, their crews cheering as they rumble onto solid treadway. Overhead, P-47 Thunderbolts strafe German positions, buying time. But threats loom. Rommel's Panzer Lehr Division counterattacks near Bayeux, 75mm shells arcing toward the harbor. One strikes a whale section, buckling steel. Otway's divers plunge in. torches flaring underwater to patch the breach. Mines drift in. EOD teams in frogman suits detonate them with controlled blasts that send geysers skyward. June 7, 1944. Dawn breaks over Arromanches, the Normandy sun piercing the haze of gun smoke that clings to the cliffs like a shroud. You wade through the knee-deep surf of Gold Beach, the cold channel water soaking your boots, the metallic clang of unloading operations echoing against the newly formed Mulberry A cranes whine overhead, their long arms swinging pallets of 25-pounder artillery shells from the Liberty ship SS Empire Lance, docked at Pierhead No. 3. Sergeant Bill Otway, sweat beading on his forehead despite the chill, directs a squad of pioneers. Hook it secure, mind the sway. The net groans under 20 tons of cargo, lowering onto a waiting DUKW amphibious truck that churns through the shallows toward the Whale roadway. The harbor pulses with life, a floating city defying the odds. The Phoenix breakwater, now a solid crescent 2 miles long, muffles the waves to a gentle lap inside the enclosure. 4 spud piers jut seaward like steel fingers, each 1,000 feet long, their pontoon platforms rising and falling with the 24-foot tide on hydraulic legs that hiss and clank. Beckett's design shines. The adjustable spuds grip the seabed, allowing seamless unloading around the clock. By midday, 7,000 tons cross the piers, rations for the 3rd Canadian Division pushing toward Caen, fuel for the Cromwell tanks of the 7th Armored Brigade grinding through bocage hedgerows. Inland the impact ripples. General Bernard Montgomery, Monty to his troops, surveys from his caravan HQ near Crewley, binoculars trained on the harbor's haze. "Bloody marvelous," he mutters to aide-de-camp Captain Noel Chavasse, the scent of pipe tobacco mingling with diesel exhaust. Without Mulberry, the beaches would choke. Open shore unloading at Juno and Sword yields a trickle, bogged by tides and E-boat raids. Here, efficiency reigns. Cranes like the British-built Coles swing 40 loads per hour, lorries queuing on the Whale treadways that flex like accordions over the swells. Across at Omaha Beach, Mulberry B mirrors the miracle, though scarred by D-Day's carnage. Captain Edward Luther, his uniform torn from shrapnel, oversees assembly amid the wreckage of Vierville Draw. American Phoenixes, taller, squarer than their British kin, form a harbor for the 1st Infantry Division. Seabees from the 81st Construction Battalion weld under fire as V Corps Commander Major General Leonard Jarrow radios urgent pleas, supplies critical, push the piers. By June 8th, B unloads 5,000 tons, M1 Garands for the Big Red One, plasma for field hospitals where medics like Corporal Eugene Sledge patch the wounded under canvas tents. You feel the rhythm, a convoy of LSTs noses in, ramps dropping to disgorge M4 Shermans, their crews cheering as they rumble onto solid treadway. Overhead, P-47 Thunderbolts strafe German positions, buying time. But threats loom. Rommel's Panzer Lehr Division counterattacks near Bayeux, 75mm shells arcing toward the harbor. One strikes a whale section, buckling steel. Otway's divers plunge in, torches flaring underwater to patch the breach. Mines drift in. EOD teams in frogman suits detonate them with controlled blasts that send geysers skyward. June 10th, peaks, Mulberry. A handles 9,000 tons, B close behind. Troops pour ashore, 150,000 by week's end, vehicles 30,000. The harbors feed the breakout. Ammo for the 101st Airborne holding Carentan, rations sustaining the push to Cherbourg. Tennant, aboard his command ship HMS Dispatch, coordinates with precision. Tugs reposition caissons against shifting sands. Dredgers clear channels of silt and debris. Yet the channel's wrath builds. June 19, 1944. A low-pressure front barrels in from the Atlantic, winds howling to force 740 knots that whip foam into stinging needles. You brace on Pierhead No. 2, the structure shuddering as waves crest the Phoenixes, crashing into the lagoon. "Secure the lines!" Otway yells, his voice lost in the gale. Tugs strain to hold formation, but anchors drag. Beckett's kites tear like paper. At Mulberry B, chaos erupts. American caissons, less robust in design, shear apart. One 6,000-ton unit capsizes, debris smashing into piers. Luther's men abandon ship, lifeboats pitching in the maelstrom. For 3 days, the storm rages. The worst in 40 years, meteorologists later say. Winds top 50 knots, waves 20 feet. Mulberry A holds, battered but functional. British Phoenixes, with curved bows, deflect the fury better. But B disintegrates. 800 feet of pier wrecked. 20 vessels sunk. Supplies strewn across the beach like flotsam. By June 22nd, as skies clear, salvage begins. Divers like Harry Mills recover what they can, winches hauling twisted steel from the depths. In the storm's wake, resolve hardens. Mulberry A rebounds, unloading 12,000 tons daily by late June. Cherbourg falls on the 27th, its port sabotaged but repairable. Yet the harbors peak. Over 2.5 million men, 500,000 vehicles, 4 million tons of supplies by October. Without them, Overlord stalls. Historians will credit Mulberry with shortening the war by months. You stand amid the ruins and resilience, the sea calming, the war grinding on. The impossible, forged in secret, now etched in history's tide. July 1st, 1944. The sun beats down on the makeshift quays of Mulberry A, the air thick with the rumble of engines and the sharp crack of cargo nets slapping against pier sides. You duck under a swinging crane arm on pierhead number 1, the steel deck plates warm underfoot, vibrating with the weight of a column of M3 half-tracks rolling ashore from the SS Fort Catin. Brigadier Bruce White, his uniform dusted with Normandy chalk, strides the whale roadway, clipboard in hand, barking at a team of Royal Pioneer Corps laborers. Double the shifts. Monty's armor needs petrol now. The harbor, scarred by the great storm but unbowed, throbs like a heart, pumping 15,000 tons daily into the Allied veins. In the weeks following the tempest, reconstruction is relentless. Divers in brass helmets scour the seabed, hauling up twisted remnants of the American Mulberry B, now dubbed Mulberry Wreck, by GIs nursing grudges against the weather gods. At Omaha, salvage crews under Captain Luther repurpose surviving Phoenixes into a makeshift gooseberry breakwater, sheltering smaller craft. But it's Mulberry A that endures as the workhorse, its British-engineered caissons holding firm against lesser squalls. By mid-July, the port rivals pre-war Liverpool in throughput. 20,000 troops disembark weekly, their boots thudding onto French soil amid cheers from war-weary locals waving tricolors from ruined farmhouses. You sense the shift. The beaches, once killing grounds, now logistics hubs. Inland, the supplies cascade. Crates of .303 rounds feed the Bren guns of the 51st Highland Division as they slug through Caen's rubble. Jerry cans of Avgas fuel Spitfires from the 2nd Tactical Air Force, their Merlin engines roaring over hedgerows laced with German snipers. General Omar Bradley, commanding the U.S. First Army, credits the harbors in dispatches to Eisenhower. Without them, we'd be scraping barrels by fillets. Cherbourg's capture on June 27th yields a sabotaged mess, docks mined, cranes toppled, but Mulberry bridges the gap, sustaining Operation Cobra's breakout. August 1944. Paris falls, and the harbor's role evolves. You watch from a jeep on the bluff above Arromanches, the harbor a distant mosaic of activity under a sky streaked with Allied contrails. Tennant's command ship signals reduced ops as Seine ports open, but Mulberry A persists, unloading until November. Total tally, over 2 million tons through A alone, eclipsing initial estimates. The American B, though crippled, contributes 600,000 tons before decommissioning, enough to arm Patton's Third Army for its dash across France. Flash to the planners' retrospectives. In London's War Office, Hughes Hallett toasts with Mountbatten over sherry. We took the port with us, as I said. The toll, 20,000 workers built the components, 45 firms from Vickers to Balfour Beatty poured the concrete. Casualties low, fewer than 100 in assembly, but the engineering triumph masks the human grit. Men like Beckett, knighted post-war, reflect on the whale that spanned tempests. Hughes, the Welsh visionary, sees his sketches immortalized in museums, yet controversies simmer. Critics in Westminster question the $30 million cost. Could it have bought more bombers? Eisenhower defends in memoirs, "The Mulberries were invaluable. They assured the rapid buildup." Historians later quantify, without them, the lodgment area starves, delaying victory by 6 months, costing untold lives. The harbors foil Hitler's strategy. His Atlantic Wall assumed port dependency, but Churchill's fantasy outflanks it. Decommissioning begins October 1944. You stand on the now quiet piers as tugs tow surviving phoenixes to Antwerp, bolstering that captured port. Waves reclaim the rest, caissons settling into silt, becoming artificial reefs for channel fish. By war's end, scraps litter Normandy beaches, rusted treadways, barnacle-encrusted spuds, monuments to ingenuity. Post-war, the legacy ripples. Mulberry inspires Cold War logistics, floating bases in Korea, Vietnam. Engineers like Otway return home, their stories fueling documentaries and books. Arromanches hosts a museum where veterans like Riley point to models. "We built the impossible, lads." You linger as dusk falls, the tide lapping at history's edge. From Churchill's memo to Berlin's fall, the Mulberries weren't just harbors. They were the bridge to freedom, forged in secrecy, tested in storm, eternal in triumph. September 1945. The ruins of Arromanches stand silent under a crisp autumn sky, the once frantic harbor now a skeletal relic lapped by indifferent waves. You walk the weathered whale treadways, now half buried in sand and seaweed, your footsteps crunching over rusted bolts and barnacle-crusted steel. The Phoenix caissons loom offshore like ancient monoliths, their concrete scarred by shellfire and storms, home now to gulls wheeling overhead with piercing cries. A local fisherman, Henri Duval, mends nets on the beach, his weathered face lifting as he points with a gnarled finger. "Les pores artificiels. They saved us, but the sea takes back what it gives." The war is over. VE Day's euphoria fades into reconstruction, but here the Mulberries whisper of what was wrought. In the months after decommissioning, the harbor's remnants become waypoints for returning troops. You join a group of veterans from the 50th Division, disembarking at Southampton, their eyes distant as they recount the miracle. Private Tom Riley, the Liverpool docker turned rigger, slaps a comrade's back. "Remember the gale? Thought we'd sink with the lot." Laughter mixes with solemn nods. They've seen Paris liberated, the Rhine crossed, Berlin in ashes, all fueled by those floating piers. Back home, engineers like Major Alan Beckett return to civilian life, his designs earning him the OBE in the King's Honors List. In quiet pubs, he sketches on napkins for wide-eyed locals. It wasn't magic, just maths and metal. Across the Atlantic, the American experience stings but instructs. In Washington, D.C.'s Pentagon corridors, Rear Admiral Homer Wallen reviews Mulberry B's autopsy. "The storm gutted us," he admits to aides over steaming coffee, maps spread under fluorescent lights. The U.S. Navy adapts. Future amphibious ops incorporate Beckett's flexible roadways, tested in Pacific atolls. By 1950, the Korean War sees portable harbors inspired by Mulberry, quick-deploy breakwaters shielding Incheon landings, where Marines under General Douglas MacArthur storm ashore with echoes of Normandy. You feel the broader ripples in academic halls. At Cambridge's engineering faculty, Professor J.D. Bernal lectures on the harbor's physics, his pipe gesturing at blackboard equations for ballast and buoyancy. "Churchill's folly became our triumph," he declares to rapt students, many fresh from DMOB. Books emerge. Hughes Hallett's memoirs detail the Dieppe spark. White's technical tomes dissect the Phoenix pour. In 1947, The Institution of Civil Engineers awards gold medals to the team. Hugh Iris Hughes accepts with humility, his Welsh lilt recounting Bangor's midnight drafts. Yet sacrifice lingers. Memorials rise. At Arromanches, a plaque honors the 17 drowned in the great storm, names etched in bronze. You trace them with your finger, ordinary men like Seaman Harry Mills, lost to a rogue wave while repairing underwater. Families visit, laying wreaths amid the tide pools, whispers carried on the breeze. The harbors teach resilience. In 1953's Dutch floods, similar caissons stem the North Sea's breach. In 1960's Vietnam, floating piers supply Mekong deltas. By the 1970s, tourism awakens the site. You stand with a tour group, guide microphone crackling. Here, 80,000 workers defied impossible, 2 harbors, built in secret, towed to victory. Museums open, models whir in glass cases, films flicker with D-Day footage. Veterans like Otway return for anniversaries, medals pinned, eyes misting at the preserved spud pierhead thrusting into the bay. "We built more than ports," Otway tells a BBC crew, voice steady. "We built hope." Into the 21st century, the legacy evolves. Climate engineers study Mulberry for rising seas, floating barriers against erosion. Documentaries on YouTube revive the tale, immersive recreations of the crossing, voices of Churchill and Mountbatten booming from speakers. In 2024, for D-Day's 80th, world leaders gather at Arromanches, the surviving caissons a backdrop to speeches on innovation amid adversity. You turn from the sea, the sun dipping low, casting long shadows over the artifacts. The Mulberries, born of desperation, stand as testament. When told impossible, humanity engineers the extraordinary.